Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. Are you passionate about creating amazing podcasts? Terrific. You are in the right place. Welcome to Pod Talk, short conversations with podcast creators that are not just about podcasting, because I like to take the scenic route, as I say all the time. My guest today is Lindsay McMahon. Welcome, Lindsay. How are you today?
Hi, Craig. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for, I love podcasters who reach out to me. If anybody listening who's got a show and thinks that they shouldn't be on the show, you could just reach out to me and maybe you can be on the show. So thank you so much for doing the initial outreach and then showing up on a pre-call, and for being a consummate professional. Do the part that I think I love to do most, which is your podcast is called All Ears English. You can just go to allearsenglish.com. It's spelled like you expect. And I always like to say, congratulations on, and know how many episodes. You're at like 2,427, so you
That's
don't
right.
need congratulations. But congratulations. I listened to the most recent one.
Thank you.
I got a million questions. Let me start with you have nailed, and if I'm pausing, it's not because I don't have anything to say. It's I'm like, oh, I got so much. You guys have nailed the can says tuna. Like, this show is about learning to speak English. And
Yes.
then when you I listened to, I think the first one that's available is number one, but like it's number 700. I've listened to the first one. I've jumped into one in the middle. I've listened to the most recent one. They're all the same, not the same content, but
Correct.
they're the same length, the same delivery. It's the same
Yes.
lighthearted thing. The people who show up in the show are like, you really nailed the formula. So you know who it's for. It's correctly labeled. You deliver the thing, and then you do the
Mhm.
part that I think I suck at. And maybe all indie podcasters are like this, is that part at the end about having an ask or getting people to do something. I have almost twice now taken the English language skills assessment test. Just because
So it's working. I
I
see.
have to do it. So how intentional, I think it's pretty intentional at 2470, whatever, but
Yeah.
how intentional was it from the beginning to have that clear, I'm going to call it a journey for the listener, and maybe
Mhm.
talk me through some of the
Yes.
things that surprised you in developing that?
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you picked up on that and asked that question. That's not a question that a lot of people ask me about, but it is a key piece of our formula for success. It's kind of below the radar, but it is about trust, Craig. This is about, when you work with any large brand, you know what you're going to get. And it's the same thing that we're going after, but we add the personal touch and the personal feeling to it. So when you combine the consistency of a large brand experience with people feeling like they're chatting with two friends in a cafe, or they're listening to two friends chatting in a cafe, that is a huge part of our success at All Ears English. So
Mm.
in the beginning, yeah, it was actually pretty formatted from the start. We sat down and we thought, what is going to make up an All Ears English episode? What is it going to feel like to consume an All Ears English episode? What are the key touch points they need to hear and feel in every episode to feel like they've had the All Ears English experience for the day?
How many do you ship every week? Or it seemed like you're on more than
Oh
once a
no,
week, wasn't it?
we publish 5. So if we have 3 shows, but I think today we're focusing on All Ears English podcast. It's
Well, we
all
need
the
to talk
same
about
target
that too,
audience.
but
Yep.
just all ears English to start.
On All Ears English, we publish 5 days a week, Craig.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you batch your work. Maybe there's like a million things. I like, we could talk about process and tips and burnout.
Yeah.
But in every one of those, I'm imagining that somebody who wants to learn English is
Mhm.
just like, yeah, give me them all. Like they're listening to
Yeah.
the back catalog. They're just consuming tons of them. And every single one of them has the same, I'm talking to the people listening now. Every single one of them has the same basic calls to action. It sounds the
Mhm.
same. If those people aren't
Yes.
slapping their headphones off and going to the website, they're really not trying to learn English.
It's true. Yeah, and there's
That's
something
a
there
million
too,
questions.
because we are serving English language learners, global professionals is what we say. Anyone who,
Yeah.
speaks English as a second language and is especially learning it for business or travel, and they want to travel the world, they want to live a cosmopolitan lifestyle. You are learning a language, and so I believe from a perspective of applied linguistics, you do need a level of consistency to learn. Right? So we have a
Yeah.
template of what they can expect, and then we fill in the blanks with the variety in the content. So there's a template, and then there's a variety of content that fills in those blanks. So that helps for language learning itself and comprehension.
Okay, you know what else helps? Your tagline. I get so many ideas.
Yeah.
Your tagline is brilliant.
Thanks.
It's connection, not perfection. That's one of
right.
those things that makes me want to just like knock my desk over. Like, oh, everything I've done to date sucks. That's way better.
Thank you.
Back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was in college, I don't even remember how. I think it was a bulletin board, like a piece of paper stuck on a bulletin board. This is pre-internet. Somebody was asking for a language tutor, and I don't know how or why I volunteered for that because I was an engineering college nerd, and like language tutor would never be on my radar. But somehow I wound up. I can't even remember the person's name. It was a nice Korean gentleman, and he wanted to be better at English, and I can talk. So all he did, I think we met like once a week. We would sit in the university center and he would show up with a notebook completely covered in scribbles in Korean with a couple of English phrases.
Yeah.
And he would just like turn to a page and go, the equivalent of WTF. And he'd give me a phrase. And every single time I went, oh, that's weird. And then we'd have this great conversation that would go for like an hour about this thing. And it would always be, people listening, Craig, where are you going? I'm going somewhere. It would always be, there was a story that he had where this came from. Like somebody said, I can't just wave a magic wand. It's a callback to your most recent episode.
Sure.
I can't just wave a magic wand. And then he would tell the story about where that happened and why it happened. And I'd be like, oh, and then we would talk about it a little bit. And of course, he and I developed a great connection. We were in like in a public space. People would glom onto our conversation. We'd like have extra people at the table. And then after a while, they'd be like, excuse me, what the hell is going on here? And we're like, oh, we're trying to get better at English. So you are so right about the connection part. Because even as a teacher, it sucked me in. Did you know that from the beginning? I think I remember you telling me this. Yeah. You didn't start with a podcast, but
there were seeds of that because I had my own experience traveling the world. And frankly, I had my experience feeling disconnected, feeling what it feels like to be our listeners, right? And you feel that language comes between you and we all as human beings, we want human connection. It's one of our most important needs as human beings, right? And so I was traveling for a year. I lived in Japan for a year and a half, and then I traveled South America for a year. And I was an intermediate Spanish speaker. And I had some moments where I was frankly very embarrassed and ashamed of my language skills because I couldn't get the joke. I couldn't get the idiom. And I felt literally I was sitting at a campfire. It's the most, primitive thing we do as human beings. And I felt like I was outside of the group, right? It's the biggest blow to the human brain. It puts us into our lizard brain. I'm not included. This hurts,
stapled on smile. Yeah. I have no idea what's going on.
And so the seeds of it were there, but I had never articulated why I teach English as a second language or why I believe that we learn, why it actually matters. So every episode, we dig into that idea of a magic wand. Where would that come up? Why does that matter for human connection? What are the moments that we can not just learn the grammar and the vocab, but build that connection? How can we use this learning point to be happier in our lives, to be more connected? So,
yeah, the magic wand one. There was the coffee or tea episode. You guys were talking about it in the episode that I was listening to, and I think, for people who maybe haven't heard the show, why would you? You've just met Lindsay. The format of like, okay, here's the thing that we're going to discuss, and then different ways that it comes up. And that's really, it's very conversational the way that you, and here comes our next topic, the co-host, the way that you and the co-host talk about this. It's pretty clear that you know what the thing's going to be, but it's not rehearsed. There's no script. Right. You're pretty much just like banting it back and forth, playing with the topic. And I think that organic, so this is going to lead into my question. Lindsay knows where I'm going, but that organic energy between you and your co-host, it comes through. Like people know that you guys are just having a conversation. So I guess the question I really want to ask is, okay, you have, over in the past and currently, blah, 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 you have 4 different co-hosts that have worked on this show.
Yes.
And I think, I know for myself, but I think other podcasters I've talked to, the idea of like finding a co-host is like this, boy, I hope that happens to me someday. Like the idea of intentionally doing it is really like, wait, what? So I know why you want to co-host because it helps with workload, but like, how do you go about like finding /hiring /training /creating the synergy? How'd you do that?
It's a great question. I've been lucky enough that the show is frankly really fun to create, and our team members are happy. So I'm the owner of All Ears English. I've historically hired 3 out of my 4 co-hosts over the years, but they've stayed with me for so long because we respect each other. We have a genuine rapport. So they are team members. They do work for me at All Ears English, but we work together. And one of them's been with me for 10 years, the other for 5. And so frankly, I haven't had to do, knock on wood, a lot of hiring because I've been so lucky to meet amazing people. My first co-host, so the show has always been co-hosted, Craig. There's always been 2. And that's part of that is language training. I believe our listeners want to hear a model of what they can aspire to, and they don't want to sit in their room and talk to them by themselves. They just don't want that, right? And so we will always have a co-host, and I co-founded All Ears English with my original co-host. It was great, but she left after a year. She wanted to go in another direction. So I had a real emergency to get another co-host on board. And that's when I hired 2 co-hosts. One of them is still with me. This is 2014, and the other just left this year after 10 years. And so that's what it was. I had an emergency. I needed a co-host. And so I hired 2 and then brought on the other one 5 years later. Yeah.
Did they have questions for you, or did you feel like you just vetted them very carefully before letting them in, giving the keys to the kingdom? Or did it help to have back episodes for them to listen to? Like, we would like to make more kind of like this? Or?
Yeah, there was a process that we went through. First of all, I got the word out through the graduate programs in TESOL. TESOL is teaching English to speakers of other languages. So I basically emailed every TESOL program in the country and said, send this to your list. This was years ago. So now I think it would be a little harder to get in touch with those programs. And then we had a process. We chatted first. Do I actually enjoy talking to this person? Because I'm going to spend many hours chatting with them.
Presence on mic.
And then I told them about essentially what you asked earlier, what the formula is, what every episode has, and what the sequence is. And I said, can you build an episode? Show me an episode that you've built. So they would bring their episode, and we do a faux recording, like a test recording, and see how it feels. How does it feel? What have they written? Is it on vibe? Do they get the vibe of All Ears English? And then additional interviews, maybe another co-host in the team would interview that person. And then a lot of it is gut feeling, right? Can this person commit?
Connection.
And
if you
connection,
gut
feeling. Yeah, I've been incredibly lucky to have them. And the show never would have made it to episode 2400 if it weren't for my team.
Go ahead.
There is something I do want to say, depending on what your listeners are podcasting for. If they are building a business, I would look at hiring a team of co-hosts, a few of them, because if it's a hobby, then maybe it's okay just to partner with a friend, a buddy down the street who wants to get together and have fun. But if you're building a business that is the core of your marketing, I would suggest being formal about it and hiring the person, putting them on your payroll. I offer 401k match. I offer PTO. It's a legitimate job. And so that's important for my teammates, right? This is not,
I agree with you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm often yelling into the wind. Nobody cares. I'm often yelling like, don't do stuff for free. Like if everybody does everything for free, then nobody gets paid to do the thing that we all love doing. And I'm an indie podcaster, meaning I do it myself, but I also, all the shows that I have are hobbies.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm tinkering with something for the other big show is called Movers Mindset. I'm tinkering with something for the other show that might lead to more opportunities for me to go coach movement in person, having nothing to do with podcasting. So I'm starting to think about, maybe I could make a commercial venture out of this other show.
Yeah.
But not
it's a matter of like, you need to be able to trust they're going to look at it as a job, a bit of a job, right? So that, because you think of it, if you want to be consistent for your audience, you need them to show up, and that'll only, if it's a fun hobby, it'll work for a while, but then something will come up, and you need that consistency for your audience.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Turn signal, turning left. Tell me about, I hate to call it the funnel because I want to make it sound like it's just, total machination, but the funnel. Tell me about like what you literally do, like when someone is listening or on the website or reading show notes, all the places where somebody would bump into what I'm going to call the ask or the action that you want people to take. Can you just give me that, what I call the user story, the user experience of that? And I also want to know, did you hit that home run out of the gate? Was that also baked into the DNA or?
I think I had an awareness from the early days, this is 2013, that we needed a lead magnet. So the goal of any kind of top level content is to have some sort of lead magnet. So you are collecting email opt-ins. People are saying, yes, I want to hear from you. And then you're eventually launching something, whether that's a course or a product. We knew we were going in that direction. I think
Right.
we've gotten better over the years at trying different things and getting something that tends to be quite attractive. Quizzes are very attractive. I mean, you almost did it twice. So, as a native speaker of English.
Do you know why I didn't do it? I was afraid I wouldn't get like whatever the highest is, A5 or whatever, the C's. I thought, oh, what if it dings me on something and I'm not on English? Like, no, I'm a total
Well,
language nerd.
I'm glad to hear that it works. That's good. That's great news. That people love taking quizzes. They want to know something about themselves because in the end, it's about them. It's not about you as the content creator.
Yeah,
So
even connection really is about the listener.
them.
It's all first person.
100%. Yeah. So that's what we do. We make sure every episode, in the bumpers of the episode, the intro, outro, we try to mention the opt-in. We could mention it more, but we do have other things we ask them to do, like to hit follow on the show, which grows the show. So you're choosing between, are we growing the show today or are we growing the email list today, right? You can't send them to 10 different places. We also utilize our website. We use Opt-in Monster as a pop-up to get people to opt in for the quiz is another thing we do. Show notes, yes, we do that too. So there's a number of ways that they come in, but a lot of it does originate from the podcast and the website. Yeah.
I gotta believe there's a couple of things that are really working in your favor. And this is people would hear that and it's like, I was, as your potential listener, I was listening to this thing because I'm interested in English. And now here's an opportunity to do more of the thing that I already love doing. So if for me, it's about podcasting, taking a quiz isn't really about podcasting, but going and reading some English and writing it down, like you're just feeding them right into what they wanted more of anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I got like 9 more questions. Anything top of mind for you that you want to veer off on before I grab the steering wheel?
You really recognize the key pieces of success that I think a lot of the interviews that I do about podcasting people don't necessarily pick up on, which is the consistency in our formula. That there is there is a deliverable and our audience trusts that we will publish on a daily basis and that it will feel like an All Ears English episode.
I don't open my podcast player and there's a 3-hour, there's one of those Dan Carlin history. It's like, what's this thing? It's 20 another set. Yeah.
Right. And that's his format. That works great for him and his audience. But I'm obsessed with my listeners. So I'm always thinking about them. If I feel like one of us is kind of going off a little too long in a story and it feels like it's not relating, that's a big red flag in my head. It's like, boom, boom, the listener might be bored right now. Bring it back to them. Bring it back to the listener every time. Right.
I don't think I heard any, one of the things I'm listening for when I listen to shows is how much is edited. And I haven't heard a lot of editing. I certainly didn't. Every once in a while I hear one that's really weird. You're like, what was, in other shows, I've heard really weird jump edits and I haven't heard any of those. And it sounds like pretty much like a hot take, which I think speaks to you and the co-host, or in some cases, I guess it's not just you, it can be the other co-hosts. And there's a whole other show, which is All Ears Business.
We have Business English from All Ears English, and IELTS Energy from All Ears English. Yes.
There's so many things here. I feel like I need to make you do a victory lap for. So people are like, "How big is this show?" Like, it's like 100,000 downloads an episode, or something like 4 million a month. This is a big show.
All Ears English is at 3.5 million a month downloads, which comes out to about 200,000 human beings, right? So we want to make sure your listeners know downloads is not the same as human beings, right? It's a weird metric we have right now in our industry, which will shift towards verified listeners, but 200,000 human beings are listening on a 5-day-a-week basis, which is...
Do you ever freak out? Like you guys hit record and then suddenly you realize that there's a phalanx of 200,000 people behind you, or that stuff's on the internet now 10 years later and it's like, people will still go listen to that.
Right. I don't think about it too much because I come back, I do think that our vision of the human connection is still so strong inside me that I think about that. I think about that listener who might feel isolated right now because of language. Either they're living in the US and they're struggling to get connected in their community, or they're on a call from Japan to New York and they're cringing because they think they just said the wrong thing and they're not building the business relationship. So if I ever feel nervous, I come back to the mission of why I'm here.
Do you have that mission actually written? You don't have to read it, but like, do you have it actually written down, or it's just like a
We have,
general?
yeah,
Ooh,
we do have it in some, because we've had team syncs over the years where we come back, we review, our values, our why we think All Ears English exists, what we're trying to do. We do actually review that stuff, believe it or not, as a
oh,
team.
thank you. I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan of what I call the loop. Just the idea of like, a lot of people take notes. Not everybody. Everybody should. A lot of people take notes, but few people review their notes, and not a lot of people actually go, you know what? I made this mistake a third time. I think I should change my. For
Yes.
example, I'll just like, so
Yes.
Lindsay can see it. I already have printed. This is the post production checklist for your episode, which is completely not filled out at all. I'm traveling on Thursday for the next 2 weeks. So my plan is to hang up this call and ship this thing within an hour.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
you can't do one, and it's two sides. One cannot do that unless one has reviewed, circled back. I'm not saying everybody needs to be crazy checklists, but how
Right.
much of your process? Because if you're publishing 5 a week, I'm guessing you're batching at least two or
Oh, yeah.
three in a recorded call.
Correct. Yes.
So how much
So,
of the process is really like
yeah.
nerded out?
And we're actually publishing, let's say 5, 8, we're publishing a total of 10 episodes across all 3 shows a week. Okay. So plus we do Apple Plus, we do the, which are quizzes. I don't know if you've heard of, Apple Plus, where it's a subscription program that you can add on to your podcast. We do those
Mhm.
too. So it's a lot of content. So what I do is I record twice a week, one with co-host, one with Michelle, and the second one is with Aubrey. And between the 3 of us, we create those probably those about 10 episodes in that
An
in that
episode.
week. But we have a gap, right? So the ones that we're creating next week won't go out until mid-July. Right. So we have
Yeah,
a huge
you have a buffer.
runway, a buffer for like last week, I had an emergency in my family. I couldn't record. They recorded together, which was great, but they couldn't do 2 sessions. They couldn't do a double session, right? Because
Hmm.
it's a total of about 6 hours a week of recording across all of us. So
That's a
yeah, we
good.
do batch them. Mm-hmm.
That's a good scale though, because when I see numbers like X million downloads, or you hear a big show, when you see like really big shows that have highly produced video as well as audio, yeah, we know. Oh, there's like at least 5 cameras. That means there's like 3 humans in the back. There's 2 in the sound. So there's like 7 people you don't see in this frame. And when it really looks highly produced, your brain kind of goes, "There's a lot of people power here." But I think
Yeah.
your show is deceptively simple looking,
Yes.
is deceptively simple sounding. And I think it's
Mhm.
always good to hear people like, yeah, it only takes us 6 hours a week to record this stuff. That's just the recording. That's not actually making
Yeah.
shows and shipping and
Yeah.
then the show cover art and, pulling the levers to publish.
Right. I mean, luckily, in terms of my part, that is pretty much what I do is the 6 hours. So because I'm also building courses, right? I'm monetizing the show, meeting with advertisers, doing a lot of other things. My teammates, my co-hosts, they come to those meetings, recording meetings with the show, with the notes pre-prepared for each episode. They know what we're going to be teaching, what we do, outline everything. That formula is outlined. It's not scripted, it's outlined. So there's a lot of white space for innovation, right?
Right.
But everything's ready to go when we meet. So my work is about 6 hours a week in terms of creation of the content, which is
Hmm.
already quite a bit, but it's,
Yeah.
but then we have got the editor and the VA, and our team is doing the rest of the work in the background. So
So many questions. Do you run, I always think of this as the treadmill. It's like, do you just run this on the treadmill and like, yeah, whatever, until the day I drop dead? Or do you take breaks I know you don't, it doesn't look like you have specific seasons, because I don't think seasons would make sense for
no,
English
doesn't
as
make
second
any
language
sense.
learners. But do you have like a spot where you're like, we're taking, July off, or your goal is to just deliver 5 of these a week
So in the
forever?
past, right, and I hope it would be amazing to be able to continue forever. Am starting to think about what my long-term plan is and how can I replace myself eventually on the microphone to get someone that can do the same thing. And because we are so formula based, I do believe other co-hosts can create what we've created. It would just be a very rigorous process to find that person,
Find
right?
that
There is a
person.
formula, there's a value, there are values, human connection. in the past, I have said, I'm going to take 6 weeks off. I took a road trip around the US actually to build one of our courses, our ESL courses. I took a trip and I couldn't sign on from Starbucks to record the episode. So in that case, what we do, or my co-hosts have been pregnant and all sorts of things have happened over the years, we've bulk recorded in advance. So what we would see that coming months ahead, and we would say, okay, this week, instead of 6 hours, we're going to record 12 hours for the next 3 weeks. And we're going to have all those episodes done. And then we'll plug back in when we're back. That's how we take care of time off. We don't ever skip a day.
Can't stress that enough. This bulk recording, I have a show called Little Box of Quotes, which is daily quotes. And I took a year off because I had like a major illness last year, but I took a year off, but I resumed the show recently. And I yesterday was recording, I think I did 28 episodes of the show because it's a daily thing. So, it's just me reading a quote. They're like anywhere from 30 seconds to 3 minutes, the whole episode. And I basically just hit record. I have like a hot take the whole thing, play it back. If I like it, good. I hit export, and the audio workstation exports what I need. And then I throw it up on the site. But people who are, even if you are an independent podcaster, if you haven't actually tried to, turn the, if you haven't actually tried to spin that crank up the speed on a show that publishes on a set cadence, it's really hard to imagine. Yeah, well, what happens if I got sick? Because it happens, and you're like, oh, okay, I got like 9 days before we run out of content. In the future, maybe we need to have more.
More. I mean, there's some things that can mitigate that. Of course, is having a huge buffer to begin with. Even when you're working all the time, you have a big buffer. Like I said, we've got at least 3 weeks between what we're publishing today and when it comes out, and then hiring an additional co-host, even if you don't think you'll need that person, having 3 voices on the show instead of just 2. Right. So, for example, last week when I had my family emergency, I was in no place to get on the microphone last week. I was in a really bad place, emotionally. And so Michelle and Aubrey came together, got a 5 episodes done. That was it. And we'll plug back in this week, with the 6 hours. So having an additional person that can kind of hop on that mic and variety of voices, it's better. Yeah.
The variety of voices is one thing, but there's also it's like an old military adage, two is one and one is none, or something. Like, don't just bring you don't just bring a flashlight. You need 2 flashlights because one of them's going to die, of course. So you're ahead of the curve by having 2 people. Yeah.
And we even had, for a number of years, we had 3, right? Across the 3 shows, I had an additional co-host, and she also wrote content and curriculum for us, but she left the business about 6 months ago. And so we're good with 3 of us, but if for some reason I were to lose one of them, I would immediately try to hire someone else to have 3 minimum in the works. Yeah.
What's something I'm thinking? Obviously, you're not bored with podcasting, but what's something, if anything, that you've wanted to do with podcasting that you haven't had a chance to do? Because, well, to do that, I would have to go make a whole nother thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you're very clearly focused on what you're doing with podcasting, but are there other things you wanted to do? Formats, shows, ideas?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would like to get into helping people, build their podcast similar to what we're talking about today. And I really would love to pivot into that, but I'm so busy with my current show. Right. And I'm hoping one day I'll find that bandwidth to pivot in that direction. And then at that point, I'll have a lot of stories to tell and a lot of help to give. I would like to do more live events. We've done 4 or 5 live events. But we did it in a way that it was very intensive to prepare and plan. We did 2 events in Boston, 1 in New York, and 2 in Tokyo. And they were more like immersion weekends where we put together all these learning activities around the cities, which was so cool. It was by far the coolest experience I've had with our listeners. But it was a little too boutique. What I would like to do is have a larger live recording and like a happy hour, and cut out the rest of the weekend and do more cities, right? But to do that, I'd have to have someone willing to organize that for me, because it's just an incredible amount of work organizing anything.
That's an understatement, right? It's an incredible amount of work.
It became like my part-time job, just organizing these we call them urban immersion adventures. They were fun, but they were a ton of work to put together. So,
I've had tons of fun doing Movers Mindset. Started in 2017, and I did it entirely in person. So that's before everybody knew how to use Zoom and Google Meet and stuff. So it just never occurred to me to try and do it remotely. I did a couple of Skype calls to talk to people in advance, but we would just like get on a plane, a train, automobile, and we would go do the recordings, taking a production assistant with me. And I got spoiled because the quality of conversation you can have is just like, ooh, it goes up a whole level. And then we would
Yeah.
ask for more time. Like we'd be in their space or we'd meet them. That's a movement based show. So we would like,
Cool.
I was in England at one point and we would like get on a train. Me and the PA would ride all the way down to Brighton and
Mm.
then go find these people doing parkour out wherever they were. We knew in advance and then hang out
Yeah.
with them and then do some parkour and then follow them back to where they lived and then do the show. And it's like such a different, there is magic, as you're pointing
Mm.
to. There's magic in that in-person space with other people.
Absolutely. It's amazing, and it's a matter of having the bandwidth to do it, and I think it is having a team that can really just organize the details, and you kinda show up as the host. That,
Yeah.
for me, is the only way that could happen again. I'd love to do that again. Yeah.
Yes. Cool. Jump in if you think of something else. But otherwise, I want to say, like, what's the closest you've ever come to burnout in the show? Like, have you ever had like, I have rules, like no decisions late in the evening when I'm hungry/angry and I need to go to bed, like just no firing people, no rage quitting at 9:00 on 9 on Tuesday. Like, have you ever come to the moment where you're like, I've learned with this, and then step back and then made a
Yeah.
change rather than an abort?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, when so we had our 4th co-host leave the business this past December, and I was very stressed out for sure. I actually came down with a case of shingles, and I think part of it was because of my
Oh,
stress.
yes, that's a way to get shingles, or boy, to
Not
have
good.
the thing flare up and give you shingles. Yes.
Yes, and at the same time, I was looking to create and launch a new course in that exact same time, and I was just very stressed of how the business was going to run because, like I said, we do more than just podcasting. Podcasting is like our
Yeah,
message
podcasting's not the
sender.
business. Podcasting
Yeah,
is not the
podcasting is
business.
is a portion of the business, but we make money in 4 different ways. We sell online courses, we license our content, that's podcast episodes and courses. We have apps, and then we do sponsorships and ads on the show. So it's an important part, but it's not everything. So I had so much, all of a sudden I was taking her part-time job, adding that to my full-time job, working a 60-hour week. It was January, it was bitter cold. It was bad. It was a bad situation. And after I came out of that, I think I sort of, just that experience of going through that, I think I've realized like it's not that dire. We haven't gone under since she left. You know what I mean? We're fine.
Yeah.
We're doing just as well financially. We can roll with this, and there can be some advantages to working with freelancers. Bringing in on the spot talent that is needed for course creation rather than having an additional person on the team permanently. There can be some advantages there from a management perspective. So just going through that depth of, oh my God, my face is breaking out. Like I'm going to the doctor. This is a dangerous kind of
Yeah.
shingles too, because it was on my face. I couldn't record for a week or two. Just hitting that bottom got me out of it and gave me a little perspective. So
Yeah, there are so many lessons you learn the hard way.
Yeah.
Like, oh, now I know what they were talking about when everybody told me all those things. There's a little joke about, I mean, this is literally true for me, but the joke is, wow, when I went to college, I thought my old man was the stupidest ape that ever walked the earth. When I came back 4 years later, I couldn't believe how much he had learned. Like,
Yeah,
all
it's true. It's so true.
lessons learned in hindsight. What do you think? So my fear is that, okay, a bit of meta, because I've only done this on like the most recent show or two. For the people who are listening to me now, I've been trying to go more into actually talking about your pronouns into Lindsay's show, my guest's show.
Okay.
And that's part of why I wanted to dig into like talking about the magic wand and describing what's in the episodes. And I'm just thinking, I still have this concern. I'm going to look over my shoulder. All the people who are listening, I have a feeling they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's Lindsay. She's got a juggernaut. That's not me. Nothing. Yeah. Whatever. If only. I have a feeling that people are still going to feel disconnected.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking like, well, we could do this like in a kitschy way. Like, what's something you'd put on a billboard that everybody would see? Or I could say, what's something you wish you could told, season 1 Lindsay. But what I'm thinking about is you really are quite far along in I'm going to say like the journey of podcasting.
Yes.
And are there any shortcuts that you think you could have taken, or do you feel like, no, I'm 10 years into a 10-year
Shortcuts.
journey. Like,
Yeah. I mean, it's part of, I have to acknowledge that part of the reason for our success in terms of the size of the show was the timing at which we launched. So I don't want people to hear 3.5 million downloads and think, oh my gosh, I could never get there. A lot of it was timing, right? So there weren't a lot of ESL shows that I was competing with at that time. We launched with bright yellow cover art, two ladies on the cover, excited to bring something new and different. And I think people can still do that in their industries, but there was less competition, just straight up less competition. But I think the key thing is have expertise in your industry and then think hard about what you disagree with about how your industry happens. What is your contrarian perspective? For us, like I said, it's human connection. I mean, we will make grammar mistakes on our show, and it does upset people. It upsets the grammarians, the linguists, right? And but we're not afraid to say, like, yes, we acknowledge we made that grammar mistake, and we're going to try to get it right next time. But our higher goal is not being correct, because that doesn't make anyone happy. And so figure out in your industry, what is your contrarian perspective? And then you have to be willing to go out there and, scream into the hilltops, because that's what's going to make you different. Anyone can do that in 2025, the same way we have since 2013. So I think don't think about like, oh, all these other podcasters are ahead, I could never be that way. It's about you, your audience, and your topic, right?
Totally agree. The contrarian point. Sometimes I don't do this often because this is a hard question to field unprepared, but sometimes I will literally ask guests who are really hitting it out of the park, what's something you believe that you think other people would disagree with?
Yeah.
Which is that thing that you just spontaneously went and talked about. I'm like, I could have totally asked you that and you would have totally hit it out of the park, just like that.
Exactly.
But I think it's really important for people. I don't want to say you have to have something that you disagree with, but you have to have nerded out into whatever the thing is. Like me, I'm doing meta about podcasting and you're teaching people about English. You have to have nerded out about that to the point where you're like, I have seen it all. I know how it's done. I know how to make the pigments that you use to make the paint that you use to, and I've tried all the formats.
Yep.
And for me, the answer is X. And that, I think, is what you've really nailed with what you've done, like the experience that you've gone through. It's like way out into the been there, done that.
Yeah. And it helps if for me as a language learner, it helps if you've literally been in that position.
Oh, good point.
I've learned the languages, but I've also taught in a place like Japan where it's still very rote memorization, sitting in classrooms, adult learners afraid to stand up and actually speak the language. Right. So I could see that problem right there. And I said, no, this can be done differently. Right. So that's it. Find what is your contrarian perspective on your industry or whatever you want to talk about, and focus on that. Don't focus on all these other podcasters that have been doing it for years. Right. Because we're not competing. Like whatever your listeners want to do, I'm not competing with them. That's the cool thing about podcasting, open RSS, niche-based content. You
said my favorite thing, open. I love it. And RSS.
Yes,
wow.
we love
everybody listening
RSS.
to my show. They know what RSS is because I beat that drum until the drum head broken, and I'm still beating the.
Oh yeah.
But yes, I totally agree with you. There's cool stuff about podcasting 2.0, like the work that's being done to try and expand what actually is in our RSS feeds. Really neat stuff developing with video and transcriptions and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I'm just watching our time tick away, and I'm leery about starting a whole nother, I call them cicadas, a whole nother cicada to the conversation when I like to go about 40 minutes.
Sure.
Do you have any, is there anything that I haven't done? Like, let's see, we've done allearsenglish.com. Is there anything that you would want to ask podcasters to do? I can't think of a good.
Well, I think a conversation about video is important to have in here for sure. I mean, I went to the podcast conference in London. I'm not sure if you were in London just a couple of weeks ago for the pod conference.
I thought about it.
Okay. I mean, it's at every conference now, right? There are at least a number of sessions on video. So what we do is we simply record our conversations and put it on YouTube. So we're also building our YouTube channel. It's not the same as creating a video from scratch designed for YouTube. That's the tricky part, right? So it's never going to be our main channel. But I think if you can get on video, they say it's one of the biggest places that podcasts are found now. And the definition of podcasting.
I was just reading that. I was just reading stats, which I think were presented at that conference. I was just reading stats that like more than 50% of all audio listening in podcasts is now done through YouTube, where a lot of people are not looking at the video. So our regular podcast shows are, like all of my shows are in YouTube, but YouTube just nails a static version of the
Mhm.
cover, the show art
Yeah.
on each episode. And it's like, yeah, but if people aren't looking, it sounds like, so yeah, I'm with
It's
you
like,
on
yeah.
video is here, and I'm okay with that.
Videos here. Try to make your content packageable for any way people want to consume. I know that I would much rather turn on a podcast and walk my dog in the park than sit and watch a video. I don't love video as a consumer, but people do,
Yeah.
right? So respect that listener, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrific. All right. That was a blast. As I knew it would be. I covered, at least I got to some of my questions, and I got lots more. So it was a pleasure. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you're very busy. I'm glad to hear that last week worked out. So just, yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time.
Thank you, Craig. Thanks for having me on. I've enjoyed our chat.